Welcome to Terrifying Creepy Stories, the place where the dark corners of forgotten places come alive through bone-chilling true tales. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. And to my loyal subscribers, thank you for always returning to the shadows with me. Before we dive into tonight's haunting story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next terrifying upload. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these creepy stories travel. Now, turn the lights down, and let's begin. Story 1. It happened when I was around 13. That awkward age when you're too old to be scared of the dark, but still too young to not be. The kind of age where you try to act brave but still feel like a little kid when you're alone in the house at night. It was a muggy summer evening. One of those nights when the heat just lingers in the air, thick and oppressive, even after the sun has long gone down. My parents had gone out for a late dinner, just the two of them. A date night, as they called it. They trusted me to stay home alone by then. I was proud of that. I had pizza in the oven, a soda on the counter, and a new horror movie I wasn't technically allowed to watch queued up on the TV. I remember feeling pretty grown up that night. But then the power went out. I was in the shower when it happened. The water was steaming, the bathroom mirror was completely fogged up. I'd just finished rinsing the shampoo out of my hair when suddenly the lights snapped off, just like that, leaving me in complete darkness. The hum of the fan stopped, too. Silence rushed in like a wave. It was so abrupt it felt like the house had exhaled. I froze. Water still falling on me, soap clinging to my skin. I didn't move for a solid 30 seconds. I thought maybe the lights would come back on. They didn't. At first, I tried to be rational. Maybe the power had gone out on the whole street. That happens sometimes during summer storms. But then I realized I hadn't heard thunder. Or rain. In fact, I hadn't heard anything outside. Just the creaking of old pipes and the slow drip of water echoing off tile. I grabbed a towel and stepped out, heart thumping harder than it should have been. The bathroom felt colder now without the light, even though it was still hot. I toweled off fast, slipped into my shorts and a t-shirt, and opened the door into the hallway. The house was pitch black. I knew every creaky floorboard of that place, but I still moved slow, like each step might betray me to something watching in the dark. And that's when I noticed something strange. Looking out the hallway window, I could see down the street. The Wilsons' porch light was on. So was the one across from theirs. Every house on the block had power, except ours. It was like our house had been singled out. I stood there for a long time, towel still half draped around my neck, peering through the blinds at my lit-up neighbors, like I was standing in the one dead zone of the entire neighborhood. I tried to come up with a reasonable explanation, but my brain was already spiraling. A power outage that only affected one house. That didn't seem normal. It felt deliberate. Personal. I went back to the kitchen, fumbled through a drawer for the flashlight. We had a big one with a rubber grip, and I clicked it on with trembling fingers. The beam cut through the dark in a sharp cone of light, but somehow that made things worse. Shadows seemed to crawl just beyond the edge of the light. I checked the front door. Still locked. Back door? Locked too. I even opened the basement door but didn't dare go down there. I wasn't that brave. Instead, I sat on the couch, every light in the house dead, the silence so loud I could hear the tick of the wall clock behind me. I texted my dad, Power just went out. Weird thing is, it's just our house. Everyone else's lights are on. Should I call someone? No reply. I tried calling next, but the call rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. That was when I started to feel really alone. I kept the flashlight aimed toward the hallway, every nerve in my body buzzing with tension. My brain started playing tricks on me. I'd hear a creak upstairs, or a faint tap against the window, and my stomach would not. I kept looking at the reflection in the dark TV screen, just to make sure no one was standing behind me. I was sweating and cold at the same time. Like my body didn't know how to feel anymore. Eventually, I called him again. This time, he picked up. "Dad?" I asked, barely holding it together. Hey, calm down," he said, and just hearing his voice made me want to cry. "It's probably just the breaker. You remember how the air conditioner and the water heater sometimes trip the panel? Especially if they kick on at the same time." I didn't remember that. That had never happened to me before. But apparently it had happened once or twice before when I was younger and just didn't notice. Still, it didn't explain everything. Why then? Why now? Why right when I was most vulnerable? Why only our house? "Go to the garage," he said. "Flip the main breaker and see if the lights come back. I'll be home in about 20 minutes, okay?" So I did what he said. The garage was worse than the house. It smelled like dust and gasoline. The shadows in there didn't move, but they felt like they were watching. I aimed the flashlight at the breaker box, opened it up, and found the main switch flipped halfway between on and off. I forced it back into place. The lights came back on with a buzz, one by one, like the house was waking up from a nightmare. I felt the heat of relief in my chest. But the weird thing is, I didn't feel safe. Even with the lights on. Not after sitting in the dark like that. Not after knowing I was the only one without power, the only one in that moment who could have been isolated. When my parents came home, my dad gave me a whole explanation about how the HVAC system and the water heater pull too much load sometimes. How it's rare, but it happens. He promised to look into fixing it, said he was proud of me for staying calm. I didn't tell him that I hadn't stayed calm at all. I didn't tell him how many times I thought someone was in the house with me. I didn't tell him I kept seeing something flicker in the corners of my vision, something that disappeared the second I turned my head. The lights never went out like that again, not exactly. But for weeks after, I couldn't shower without leaving the bathroom door cracked open. Couldn't fall asleep without checking the hallway 3, 4, 5 times. Story 2. I live alone in a third-floor apartment on the edge of a quiet neighborhood that always felt safe, until that night. It was around 2 a.m. on a Thursday, and I was still up, working on a freelance project. I tend to keep weird hours. I've always done my best work when the world goes still. My desk sits against the window that looks out over the narrow alley behind my building. It's not exactly scenic, but at night, the glow from the street lamp bounces off the concrete just enough to make it feel less claustrophobic. The apartment was silent except for the soft tapping of my keyboard and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. No TV, no music. Just me, the glow of my screen, and the task I was struggling to finish before my self-imposed deadline. Then I got the alert. My phone buzzed with a push notification from the security app one used for the cheap camera I'd installed facing the window a few weeks ago. Motion detected, back window cam. That wasn't totally unusual. Sometimes it picked up raccoons or shadows when the wind jostled the alley's junk bins. Still, I instinctively reached for my phone and opened the app. And froze. A person was standing directly outside my window. At first I thought it might have been a glitch, some weird reflection or shadow. But no. The camera was live, and there was someone outside, clear as day. Just standing there. Not moving. Not knocking. Just staring. He was maybe 17 or 18, with a mop of curly dark hair, pale skin, and this weird, almost vacant expression. His face was tilted slightly up, as if he wasn't just looking at my window, but through it, like he could see me even though I was sitting behind a bright screen in a dark apartment. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't even check his phone or fidget like a normal teenager would. He just stood there, watching. I slowly shut my laptop without taking my eyes off the feed. Then I turned off the lamp beside me, plunging the room into darkness. I felt like a child who thinks the monster in the closet can't see them if they don't move. I didn't even dare peek through the real window, just sat there for a moment, breath shallow, stomach coiled tight with unease. I moved quietly to the bathroom, the only room in the apartment without windows, and shut the door behind me. My hands were shaking a little, and I felt stupid for it. I mean, it's just some punk kid, right? Maybe a prank. Maybe he was drunk or lost or trying to scare someone. Still, there was something off about him. The calmness. The way he stood there like he had all the time in the world. I sat on the edge of the tub and waited. I waited for what felt like forever, barely daring to check my phone, half expecting another alert that he'd moved. But it didn't come. Not until I worked up the nerve to rewind the security footage. 20 minutes. That's how long he stood there. Just stood. Unmoving. Watching. No knocking, no pacing, no visible reason to be there. When I saw that, I finally called the cops. My voice shook more than I wanted it to, and I hated that. I told the dispatcher that someone was loitering right outside my third-floor window, and yes, I had footage. Yes, he was still out there. Or had been. By the time the officers arrived, he was gone. They searched the area but didn't find anyone. I showed them the footage, and one of the officers gave me that standard "keep your doors locked" line, followed by a casual suggestion to upgrade my camera system. They weren't dismissive exactly, but I could tell they thought it was just a bored kid doing something dumb. The strange part is, I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak in the walls, every gust of wind rattling the windows kept my nerves on edge. I kept checking the feed over and over, just in case. And sure enough, he came back. An hour after the cops had left, there he was again, same posture, same dead stare, same eerie calmness. This time, I didn't turn off any lights. I didn't move. I just sat behind the curtain, watching the feed from my phone in silence while my real eyes stared out into the black window just a few feet away. He stood there for less than 5 minutes that time, then walked off into the darkness. I haven't seen him since. I filed a report. Sent the footage to the building manager. They said they'd add extra patrols, check the building's access points, install more lighting in the alley. But no one ever figured out who he was, or why he was there. And here's the part that gets to me. I live on the 3rd floor. The alley wall is steep, smooth brick with no ledges or fire escape. There's no way he could have climbed up without a ladder or scaffolding. But the footage clearly shows him standing at eye level with my window. It still doesn't make sense. No one else in the building reported seeing anything strange that night. And when I reviewed my camera's older footage, there were no other alerts in the days leading up to it. Just that night. And the boy with the vacant eyes, who somehow stood outside a 3rd-story window like it was nothing. I haven't taken the camera down. I never will. Every night before bed I check the feed. Not out of fear anymore, but something deeper, a quiet, lingering curiosity. Because sometimes I wonder if he was really trying to get in. Or if he was waiting for me to come out. Story 3. I grew up in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, the kind where people still wave from their porches and where the biggest drama usually came from a nosy HOA or a barking dog left outside too long. I never felt unsafe in that house. Not once. Until that night. It was a Friday evening in late spring. I remember because the sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving behind that dusky glow that makes everything look kind of golden and unreal. My parents had gone out for dinner. It was their first real date night in a while. My mom had even put on perfume, which she only did when she was trying to make a point about feeling young again. They left around 8 o'clock, waving at me through the open car window as they backed out of the driveway. I was 16, and being home alone didn't faze me at all. I actually liked it. No one to nag me about homework, no siblings fighting over the TV. Just me, some snacks, and a horror movie I probably shouldn't have been watching alone. About half an hour later, I was curled up in bed scrolling through my phone with the TV on in the background when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. A solid creak followed by the sharp click of it swinging shut again. I paused. The TV volume was low, so I was sure I hadn't imagined it. I sat up, instinctively holding my breath. A second later, I heard footsteps on the hardwood in the front hall. Slow. Unhurried. I remember furrowing my brow, confused. Why would my parents be home so soon? They had only just left. I called out without getting up, trying to sound casual. Did you guys forget something? There was a long pause. Then a voice, not my dad's, not even close, called back. What? There's somebody in here? It was a man's voice. Deep. Surprised. Not angry, not threatening, but not supposed to be there. I can't even describe the jolt that shot through my body. It was like my brain refused to process what I'd just heard. My mouth went dry instantly. My skin felt cold and hot all at once. There's a specific kind of fear your body experiences when it suddenly realizes the world around it isn't safe, and in that moment, I got the full dose. I didn't respond. I didn't even move at first. I just sat there in bed, pulse pounding in my ears. Then I heard another footstep. He was walking deeper into the house. My room was on the second floor at the back, with a small window that opened onto the sloped roof over the sunroom. Without thinking, I moved to the window, yanked it open, and climbed out onto the shingles. The adrenaline made me reckless. I didn't care about shoes or my phone or anything else. I just needed to be out of that house. I crouched low, pressed flat against the roof, and crawled toward the edge where the side yard met the fence. I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Every little creak from inside the house felt like it was right behind me. Once I was at the edge, I jumped down into the grass. The landing was rough. I scraped my palm and twisted my ankle a bit, but I didn't stop. I bolted through the gate and ran barefoot across the neighbor's yard until I made it to the end of the street where I knew the old retired guy, Mr. Brower, had cameras and was always home. I pounded on his door until he opened it in his robe, confused and alarmed. I must have looked insane, sweaty, barefoot, shaking. I told him someone had broken into my house, and to his credit, he didn't waste time asking questions. He called the police while I sat on his living room floor trying not to hyperventilate. The cops arrived less than 10 minutes later, and I went back with them, still barefoot, still shaking. And here's the part that turned the fear into something more surreal than anything I've ever felt. The man was still in the house. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't holding anything or acting violent. He was just standing in the front hallway, looking confused and awkward, like a guy who'd accidentally walked into the wrong waiting room. As soon as he saw the police, he raised his hands and started apologizing. He said he was a local pet sitter, hired by someone down the block to feed their golden retriever while they were on vacation. He had the key. He had the address written on a sticky note. Only, he'd gotten the number wrong. Ours and the neighbor's house looked almost identical from the street, especially at night. And that was it. He was just a guy trying to do his job, who'd let himself into the wrong house because he assumed no one was home. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I still can't, honestly. The police believed his story, he had legit documentation, and the neighbor confirmed it all when they got back. No charges were filed. He was let go with a warning and an apology. He even sent a written one to my parents later that week. But here's the thing, none of that erases what I felt in that moment. The instant his voice responded to mine from the darkness of the front hall, something primal in me snapped. It was like my body decided this is how you die, and acted without waiting for my brain to catch up. I think about that sometimes. How thin the line is between ordinary and terrifying. One wrong house number. One unlocked door. One sentence spoken by the wrong voice in the wrong place at the wrong time. Story 4. I moved into that apartment during one of the worst winters I can remember. It was a one-bedroom unit on the second floor of an old Victorian-style house that had been chopped up into rentals. The walls were thin, the floors creaked with every step, and the heater groaned like it had arthritis. But the rent was cheap and I liked the character of the place. I'm a quiet person, mostly keep to myself, and the idea of living in a house with a little history was actually comforting to me at first. It felt lived in. But about 6 weeks into my lease, I started hearing something. It began as faint scratching noises coming from the ceiling. At first I thought it was just the old house settling, or maybe a tree branch brushing the roof during windy nights. I even convinced myself that it could be squirrels outside. But the sound wasn't outside. It was above me. Directly above me. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more persistent it became. I emailed my landlady, a woman named Carol who lived across town. She said she'd have someone come check it out, but never gave me a date. Weeks passed. The scratching continued, mostly at night. I started to notice it always seemed to ramp up around 2 or 3 a.m., like clockwork. And it was getting louder. Then it changed. Instead of soft scratches, I started hearing small thuds. Movement. Like something was shifting its weight or dragging across the floorboards in the crawl space above my ceiling. One night, I was sitting on my couch reading, and I swear I heard a soft squeal, almost like a high-pitched whimper, followed by more frantic scuffling. It sent a chill down my spine. I emailed Carol again. This time I was more direct, borderline panicked. She brushed it off, saying it was probably raccoons or possums and no big deal. But it was a big deal. I wasn't getting any sleep. I was on edge constantly. I even stopped inviting friends over because I didn't want them hearing the noise and thinking I lived in a dump. Then came the night that finally broke me. It was just after 2 a.m. when I woke up in a panic. At first, I wasn't even sure why. But then I realized what had stirred me, the noise. It was deafening now. Not just scratching or thuds, but frantic digging. It sounded like claws scraping wood, faster and harder than anything I'd heard before. Whatever it was trying to get through. I sat up in bed frozen. The noise was coming from the far corner of the room. My eyes darted toward it just as I heard a faint crack. Then another. And then, a soft rain of dust and plaster as a tiny chunk of the ceiling crumbled and hit the floor. My heart jumped into my throat. There was a hole. A tiny one, no bigger than a coin, but enough to see that something had definitely broken through. I stared at it, breathing fast, every muscle in my body tensed. The scratching stopped suddenly, like whatever was on the other side knew I was awake. I waited. I couldn't move. My breath felt too loud, like it would draw something out. And then I heard it, soft, deliberate scurrying, moving away from that spot. That was it. I snapped. I grabbed my phone, keys, wallet, and my overnight bag. Thank God I had packed one for work the next day. I practically sprinted out of my bedroom, slamming the door behind me like I was locking a monster inside. I didn't even turn off the lights. I just went straight to the couch and lay there, wide-eyed, all night. I couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me flinch. The next morning, I called Carol again. This time I didn't email. I didn't give her the option to brush me off. I was calm but firm, told her I wanted someone over that day. To her credit, she actually sent a pest control guy while I was at work. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting for me. It was the pest guy. He said there was a family of raccoons nesting in the attic crawl space, specifically, a mother and what looked like 4 babies. They'd managed to get in through a loose vent at the far end of the roof. Apparently, the attic wasn't sealed off properly, and once the mom got in, she made herself comfortable right above my bedroom. The guy said the digging and scratching were likely the kits, raccoon babies, getting old enough to wrestle and move around. He even joked about how they must have been having a party up there. I didn't laugh. He also mentioned the hole in my ceiling. Said it was small, about the size of a quarter, and that the mother was probably trying to make space or dig through insulation when she accidentally breached the plaster. He assured me it was patched and that they were setting humane traps to remove the raccoons within a few days. Story 5. I didn't know the scariest thing that ever happened to me until it was already over. At the time, I was living in a rough part of the city with my boyfriend, Ben. He worked nights, 12-hour shifts at a local warehouse, so I was often alone after dark. The apartment complex we lived in had seen better days. The walls were stained from years of cigarette smoke, the front gate didn't lock properly, and the parking lot lights flickered like something out of a low-budget horror film. But rent was cheap, and we didn't have many options. It was the kind of place where you learn to keep your head down. Mind your business. Don't ask questions when you hear something strange outside at 2 a.m. One Thursday night, Ben had just left for work, and I was settling into my usual routine. TV on low volume, our pit mix Jasper curled at my feet, and all the doors locked. I took Jasper down around 11:30 to use the patchy strip of grass behind the building. The landlord kept an old camper trailer back there, parked just beyond the chain-link fence. I remember noticing something odd. The barbed wire that usually ran across the top of the fence had come loose, sagging like a limp vine. Jasper growled once, low in his throat, and kept sniffing toward the camper. But I tugged him back gently. "It's just a raccoon or something," I whispered, more to myself than to him. I didn't want to think too hard about what could be back there. We finished our business and went back upstairs. I didn't sleep well that night. There wasn't a clear reason. Just that feeling, like something unseen was off. I left the light on in the living room and stayed in the bedroom, half watching reruns until I finally drifted off sometime after 3 a.m. The next day, around noon, I was just about to take Jasper out again when I got a call from my friend Micah. He was downstairs and needed me to buzz him in fast. He sounded on edge, almost out of breath. When he came through the front door, he slammed it shut behind him and locked it. His eyes were wide, darting around like he was expecting someone to come charging in. "There was a guy down by your car," he said. "Crouched behind it. Just waiting." I blinked. "What? Waiting for what?" "I don't know. He came out from behind your bumper when I walked up and started closing in on me. Wouldn't say anything, just stared. I pulled my knife and he bolted across the lot." Micah always carried a blade. He said it made him feel safer around here. Normally I'd roll my eyes at that kind of thing, but in that moment I was grateful he had it. I looked out the window and saw it then, a green bundle lying next to my car, like someone had dropped a sweatshirt or a rolled-up blanket. It didn't look right. I told Micah I was going to call the cops. Something about that guy, the way Micah described him, the bundle, it all felt wrong. I barely got off the phone with dispatch before a cruiser pulled into the lot. A single officer stepped out and came over to ask where the guy had gone. I pointed in the direction Micah said he'd run. What happened next felt like a movie scene. Within minutes, more sirens. Not one or two, but a whole fleet. 10, maybe more. Police cruisers, unmarked vehicles, a SWAT truck, and even AK-9 units stormed the area. Officers jumped out with rifles and spread out across the complex. I stood at my window, heart pounding, trying to understand what was going on. One of the officers came back and asked if I'd seen anything unusual last night, anyone lurking or strange noises. I shook my head at first. But then I remembered the sagging barbed wire. Jasper's growl. The way I hadn't been able to sleep. I told the officer what I saw. He nodded, then gave me a look I'll never forget. A mix of grim respect and something else, maybe pity. "That man escaped from county jail late last night," he said. "He was in on multiple counts, assault with a deadly weapon, repeated domestic violence. He and 2 other inmates slipped out during a transfer. We've been searching all night." I felt the blood drain from my face. The officer continued. "We found signs someone had broken into your landlord's camper. Bedding was disturbed. Food wrappers. Electronics gone. And a butcher knife missing from the kitchenette." I thought I was going to throw up. The realization hit me all at once. While I was outside with my dog the night before, that man had been just feet away, hidden inside that camper, watching me. I had brushed it off. The sagging fence, Jasper's behavior, the cold weight of dread in my stomach. I had ignored every sign. He had a knife. He was trying to break into my car when Micah showed up. If my friend hadn't arrived when he did, if he hadn't startled the man off. I don't let myself finish that thought. The police eventually caught him a few blocks away, hiding in a drainage tunnel. He was covered in mud and still had the knife tucked into his waistband. I didn't sleep in that apartment again. Ben and I broke our lease a month later and moved across town, even though it nearly wiped out our savings. Story 6. I don't scare easily. Or at least I didn't used to. Growing up in a quiet suburb with motion-activated street lamps and friendly neighbors, I always felt safe. Maybe too safe. The kind of safety that makes you let your guard down and mistake predictability for control. But one night changed that. It was early spring, just chilly enough to want something warm, but not cold enough to turn on the heat. I was alone in the house. My mom had gone to visit her sister for the evening, and said she'd probably be back late. I was 17 at the time, and staying home alone didn't bother me. In fact, I kind of enjoyed it. There was something freeing about having the house to yourself. No small talk, no clanging dishes, no random questions shouted from the other room. I was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea. The lights above the stove buzzed faintly, casting a pale yellow glow across the tile countertops. The kettle had just started to rumble when everything went black. It wasn't gradual. There wasn't a flicker or a hum, or even a warning. 1 second, I was watching steam curl out of the spout like a ribbon. The next, I was standing in absolute darkness, so thick and sudden it felt like the world had been erased. For a second, I just stood there, stunned. I remember blinking stupidly, as if that would somehow turn the lights back on. But the darkness stayed. Still. Silent. Suffocating. And then I heard the front door open. I know what you're thinking, power outage, right? Rationally, that should have been my first thought too. But the timing was too perfect. Too deliberate. The lights cut out, then the door creaks open. Not 5 seconds apart. That wasn't coincidence. That was choreography. I froze. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? Like your body senses something before your mind does? That's what hit me first. Then came the rush of thoughts. Someone cut the power. They're coming in. I'm alone. I'm completely alone. I didn't move at first. Just stood in the dark, listening. The sound of the door swinging closed echoed down the hallway like it had a pulse. I reached out blindly until my fingers brushed the countertop, then crouched low behind the island, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. I reached under the sink, hands trembling, and found the drawer. The one with all the miscellaneous crap we never organized: scissors, duct tape, a flashlight that didn't work half the time. But I didn't care about the flashlight. My hand wrapped around the handle of a kitchen knife. I gripped it tight and backed into the corner, the cool floor pressing against my knees. That's when I remembered the landline. Nobody uses landlines anymore. Ours was mounted to the wall in the hallway, just outside the kitchen. I slid toward it on all fours, one hand outstretched, barely breathing. Every sound in the house was amplified: the groan of the pipes, the rustle of the wind against the windows, and underneath it all, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Soft enough that I almost doubted them, but not quite. I reached the phone and yanked it off the receiver, fumbling blindly for the keypad. I hadn't called 911 in years, maybe ever. My fingers hovered, hesitating. If I called and it was nothing, I'd be humiliated. But if I didn't call and it was something. I pressed 9. Then 1. Then I heard a voice. Hello? Anyone home? I dropped the phone. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My whole body locked up. It wasn't a man's voice, not exactly. It was soft. Familiar. But muffled, like it was coming through layers of drywall. The words hung in the air like static. My mind scrambled to recognize it, and then, slowly, painfully, I did. It was my mom. I must have made a sound, some involuntary exhale or rustle, because a few seconds later, I heard her walking toward the kitchen. She clicked her tongue in that motherly, half-annoyed way she always did when she thought something was broken. "Why is it so dark in here?" she muttered. I stood up too fast and nearly slipped on the tile. She screamed when I appeared, crouched, pale, wide-eyed, still gripping the knife like I was in a slasher movie. I must have looked insane. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped, switching on her phone flashlight. "Why are you crouching like that?" I couldn't answer at first. My voice caught in my throat. I just stood there, breathing hard, eyes darting around the kitchen like the danger hadn't passed yet. She looked at me like I was broken. And honestly, for a moment, I felt like I was. The power outage, it turned out, was just that, an outage. A random transformer issue 2 blocks over. The timing with her opening the door? Pure, goddamn coincidence. She'd gotten back early and was fumbling with her keys when everything went dark. She'd assumed I'd be upstairs and called out so she didn't scare me. Mission failed. Later that night, long after the lights had come back on and we both awkwardly laughed it off, I sat in bed and replayed everything. The sound of the door. The footsteps. The paralyzing fear. It was like my brain had clicked into some primal mode, one where every shadow was a threat, every creak a warning. And here's the thing that keeps me up sometimes: if it hadn't been my mom, if that voice hadn't been familiar, I don't know what I would have done. I was holding that knife for real. My grip was tight. My instincts were ready. Story 7. I've never been a paranoid person. Working in logistics means long hours, frequent travel, and lots of time alone in unfamiliar places. Airports at 2 a.m. Hotel rooms with buzzing fridges. Quiet apartments with paper-thin walls. You get used to it. Learn to tune out the creaks and flickers and the occasional sound of something you wish was the neighbors. But what happened that night, back home, in my own apartment, shook me in a way none of those empty hotel rooms ever could. My girlfriend, Leah, and I had this rhythm. We both traveled a lot for work, so we often go days without seeing each other. Sometimes I'd be in Chicago while she was in Portland. Other times we'd pass each other like ghosts, me arriving home the same day she flew out. It worked for us. We cherished the time we did have together, and didn't take it for granted. That week, she was in San Francisco at some conference. I was home, enjoying a rare few days off with the place to myself. We lived on the top floor of a 5-story apartment building in the city, in one of those slightly too modern complexes with polished concrete floors and exposed pipes they charged too much for. Above our unit was a rooftop deck that all tenants had access to. People mostly used it in the summer, for drinks and barbecues. It was October. Chilly. Quiet. Or so I thought. It was just after 2 a.m. when I woke up, groggy and disoriented. I'd had a couple drinks earlier and binged some late-night docuseries on cults before finally crashing. My bladder wouldn't let me sleep through the night, though, so I got up and trudged to the bathroom. The hallway was dark, lit only by the orange glow from a street lamp bleeding through the blinds. I didn't turn on the lights, no need. I knew this layout like muscle memory. On the way back to the bedroom, I passed the study. That's when I saw it. The study has a sliding glass door that leads to a tiny private balcony, barely big enough for a chair and a few plants. As I walked past, something made me glance toward it. Maybe it was movement. Maybe it was just instinct. I stopped cold. Someone was standing there. On our balcony. Facing directly into the apartment. Not moving. Not swaying. Not fidgeting. Just standing. There are moments when your brain refuses to accept what your eyes are showing you. It glitches. Tries to explain things away. Maybe it's a reflection. Maybe it's a coat rack. Maybe you're still half asleep. But none of those excuses stuck. I could see the outline perfectly. A human figure, backlit faintly by city glow, no more than 10 feet from where I stood. My whole body went cold. For a second, I just stared, paralyzed. Then instinct kicked in. I turned on the hallway light, flooding the room, and sprinted to the kitchen. My hand darted for the knife block, hard hammering. And with the other, I grabbed my phone and started dialing 911. As I turned back toward the study, ready for confrontation, I finally got a clear look at the intruder. He was a kid. 16, maybe 17 at most. Pale face. Wide eyes. Hoodie drawn tight over his head. The moment the lights came on and he saw the knife in my hand, his eyes went even wider. Not scared, startled. Like he hadn't expected me to see him. Before I could even shout, he stepped backward, grabbed the railing, and flung himself over the edge. I swear I stopped breathing. I dropped the phone and ran to the glass door, heart in my throat, fully expecting to see his broken body sprawled across the pavement below. But he wasn't on the ground. He was standing, on the balcony directly beneath mine. I watched, stunned, as he grabbed that railing, hoisted himself up, and dropped again. Balcony to balcony, he disappeared down the side of the building like it was some goddamn jungle gym. 5 floors down. No hesitation. No noise. Just soft thuds and fleeting glimpses of a dark silhouette. I opened the door and leaned out, watching in disbelief as he hit the pavement in the back lot, safely, landed with barely a stagger, and sprinted off into the night. I didn't know what to do. Call 911 again? Call Leah? Call anyone? Instead, I locked every door and window in the apartment. Twice. I sat in the living room with the kitchen knife still clutched in one hand until the cops arrived 20 minutes later. I explained what happened, still shaken, expecting them to treat it like a break-in or an attempted robbery. Instead, one of the officers sighed, glanced up toward the roof, and muttered something to his partner. Turns out, a bunch of teenagers had thrown a party up on the rooftop deck that night. Booze, weed, maybe a little more. Security footage later showed that the kid had gotten into some kind of dare, or maybe just wandered off from the group. One of the others eventually admitted he'd bet him $20 he couldn't find a way back down without using the stairs. So he tried the balconies. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't armed. He was just some drunk idiot making poor decisions. But here's the thing I haven't told anyone, the thing that still keeps me up sometimes. When I first saw him, when our eyes met through the glass, he didn't look drunk, or thrilled, or panicked. He looked lost. Like he didn't know where he was or recognize himself. Thank you for staying with me through the darkness. If you enjoy these late-night chills, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me keep the stories coming. Hit that like button if this one creeped under your skin, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next unsettling tale when it drops. Until next time, sleep tight. And don't turn your back on the shadows.